Check, check, check. Welcome. A very, 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 very warm welcome on this miserable day. Oh, God, sometimes you need events like these, right? A very, very good evening to you all, and welcome here to From BYTES to RIGHTS. The name says it all, right? It's lovely to see, you know, quite a very good turnaround again on this blistery weather. For what's hopefully turn out to be a very productive event, and at least a very inspiring event. Welcome also to the people at home, because yes, this is being live streamed. Again, apologies for the slight delay, weather related. Enjoy your dinners while you're watching this. We're not ready yet to tuck into our food just yet, but we are ready to tuck into, I think, an extremely exciting and important topic. You know, what can the European Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles mean for citizens, right? My name is Gerry Smits. I have no affiliation with Identity Valley. I am your moderator for today. But allow me to quickly introduce myself by means of giving you 3 reasons why I personally think this is very exciting, and very exciting to be here together. So first of all, as a digital and innovation consultant, freelancer, which I am, you're kind of defined by the words you use too often, right? And the words I use too often in my work are, on the one hand side, digital, and the other side, human. And I'm really excited to see, you know, how we can bridge these things, how we can bring these 2 things together by means of policy. So that's reason 1. Second reason, I'm a father of a 13-year-old who somehow convinced me that going on TikTok was a good idea. Don't know how she did that. So I'm your target audience, right? And I'm really interested to see what that all means for me as a citizen. And thirdly, as like a communication strategist, I'm very excited to be hosting an event with a title that rhymes. From BYTES to RIGHTS, right? It's all in there. You know, Identity Valley has developed DRGs relating to the SDGs. And as a communication specialist, it was really interesting to see how communication can be a leverage to start talking about these kind of things. You know, it's a little joke, but these things are very, very important. So that's why I'm excited. Okay, now, what's on the program today? Our main part is we're going to have a panel discussion with our 6 honorable experts. Before we go into the panel, though, we're going to give each of them a little moment on stage to make their statements and to give a little bit of context about who they are and what they do. But let's start with objectives, right? Always good to get that clear. Why are we here? Why has the team from Identity Valley, why have they gone through the effort to set this all up in this very cool location? Why have you all taken time out of your busy schedules to be here? So it would be rude not to invite our hosts for today to explain all that. So please give them a warm welcome, the CEO and the founder of Identity Valley, Jutta Juliane Meijer, and the Director of Policy and Research, Ferdinand Ferroli. Over to you. Welcome.
So, is this on? Can you hear us? Very good. Yeah, thank you and welcome. It's so good that you all are here, and by being here, be it online or be it on site, you already made a commitment. You already are thinking about what is it that defines our future, and how can we strengthen the human in the digital space. So thank you for being here. It's really important, and really important for us. And as not everyone already knows Identity Valley, we wanted to do a short introduction and give you the reason why we are here. I personally have been to Silicon Valley a lot, and wanted to know about the tool set and the mindset, and how was Silicon Valley able to do all these innovations in a really short time, and it changes our life. And yeah, we think there are different attitudes in the world. So as you can see clearly in Silicon Valley, it's we do it, we invented everything, and it's a lot of technologies coming from there. And then there are a lot of technologies being used also to control the citizens in another area of our world. And we think that Europe really can play a crucial role right now to care and to develop an own European way that is then benchmark for a global way of having digital rights and principles and our digital rights responsibility goals brought together in order to create a trustworthy, human-centered digital future. How do we want to do this? We created, together with lots of digital experts, these 7 digital responsibility goals, probably reminding you on the SDGs, like Gary already said, and that's on purpose because it makes it easy to give us all a framework, especially people in startups or in small, medium enterprises, but also the ones in big corporations that are working on digital strategies and don't have an orientation, and also the ones who are aware AI and ethics is something that has to come together. There is a statistic from OECD that there are more than 1,000 AI and ethics frameworks out there, but we cannot compare them because everyone is doing something else. So we want to change this and give an orientation by making these goals measurable, and then you can see where do we stand, how do we do, where do we have to improve. And through these KPIs, we can steer digital innovations in a better direction, we think. What do we have to do? We think that is the way we need to offer orientation for everyone who's doing technologies and also the ones who decide on how do we regulate technologies. And then implement it, we have to do it. And so we can offer information and give citizens a choice and everyone who wants to choose a technology wherever they are in order to, by giving them an informed decision. So making them aware about what is really involved into all these technologies and give these transparency, as you can see in our 7 goals. And there's no better place to do this than in Brussels, and I'm very happy that I have Ferdinand on my team, who used to work here in Brussels in the parliament, and I'd like to hand over for the charts why we are doing this here in Brussels.
Thanks, Jutta. I will be very short and give time to more interesting people, but just as a brief, basically to get you in the mood and the context of this, why we're here, I think Europe is the perfect fertile ground for these discussions right now. Because, I mean, we have been in discussions with the European Commission. What we really saw from a very, very early point on is that the European Commission is and also the European Parliament is very, very open to making a difference in the digital world. You can see this on the one side by all the digital legislation that has been brought forward in the last years, but also by a more general approach to the digital transformation. And you can see this here. What I want to underline here is they want to also, or one of the goals of the Commission is to empower people for a more prosperous digital future, which means it's not only about laws and restrictions on companies or on people. It's about empowering people to make the right choices, to raise awareness about these topics. And this is why we were especially interested in this European Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles that we're talking about today, because this is exactly the gap that we're filling. This is not legislation, but it's more trying to inspire some kind of like bridging the gap between legislation and also civil society action. And I think this is crucial going forward, because laws are needed, yes, but for a healthy society to work, I think, this runs on more than laws. And this is why we're here talking today. How can we make not only laws, basically making a tangible success for the people, but also how can we also include civil society and industry in really making these digital rights and principles something that can be tangible, can be measured, and can translate into tangible benefits for people. And that's why I'm very happy now to hand you back to our experts and give it back to Gary.
Cool. Let's do applause, yeah, shall we? Come on. Yes. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jutta. Thanks, Ferdinand. All right. You know, it's not like you're not smart. There's a lot of experts in this room, right? But Well, we're very excited, I think, to have our next speaker here. We have actually none other than Renata Nicolai here, who, and I should read this because you can't make mistakes with big titles, right? Who's a Deputy Director General of DG Connect. Did I get that right? Cool, good. So DG Connect, thank you. DG Connect is the Director General, well, most of you will know this, but the mission is to develop and to implement policies to make Europe fit for the digital age. So they were instrumental in the development of what we're just talking about right now. So I'm really looking forward to hear the next story. So please give her a very warm welcome, Renata Nicolai.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you and to recall this declaration and what it means and what it's there for. Let me start by, raising the question, why did we feel we needed this declaration? And I think it was from the beginning to showcase and to give a kind of a clear expression of what kind of digital transformation the EU is standing for. It's a digital transformation that should be a positive force for the better of society. That should be a force where people indeed are in the center of the digital transformation, where technology should be safe and serve to the benefit of people, where technology should empower people to pursue their aspirations and should, increase their security, safety, and their respect and the respect for their fundamental rights. So that was the background why we felt we needed some sort of DNA to kind of give us a guiding principle for whatever we want to do on the digital transition. And that's why I was very happy that we managed with the 3 institutions in December 2022, which is not so happening so often, that we signed together this kind of, declaration with the principles together. And it's not only a declaration that recalls the principles, it's also accompanied by clear commitments that we should also not overlook. It's a simple document. It's not creating new kind of, rights. It's more a reflection of what we stand for, building on the Charter in particular, but also on the important kind of legal context that we already have with the GDPR, for instance, our modern data protection law, just to give you an example. But nevertheless, it is important. Just recall the 6 principles of the declaration, very much kind of aligned with the principles that you have. So we want to put people, indeed, and their rights at the center of the digital transformation. We want to support solidarity and inclusion and not have a digital transformation that kind of deepens the divide. We want to ensure the freedom of choice online. This is what we are kind of looking a lot at the moment with the kind of the gatekeepers and the platforms, how to ensure that. We want to foster participation in the digital public space. This is also why we work a lot at the moment on solutions to keep everybody involved, but also to ensure our election integrity. We want to increase safety, security, and empowerment of individuals. This is the whole cybersecurity, safety work that we've been doing, and the promotion of the sustainability of the digital future, because, of course, the whole thing has to be looked at together. So where are we on this? Are we doing well on our declaration? Well, I would say that's at least been, indeed, the DNA and the guiding principle of a lot what we've been doing. First of all, we should underline the Digital Decade Policy Program. This is a program that stretches up to 2030, that covers kind of 4 important areas: digitalization of public administration, digital skills, super connectivity for the future, and also the digitalization of businesses. And we have started kind of reporting on this. We had our first Digital Decade report last year, giving an overview on where we are on the EU and also giving 27 different kind of, member state specific reports. And they have shown last year that we are not doing too well and that we need to kind of, advance and be more ambitious to meet our targets. But accompanied by that Digital Decade report is also in an annex how we're doing on our declaration and to see how are we kind of implementing that. So in whatever the member states are doing to fulfill the promise of the targets for 2030, they have to also respect the principles. But of course, the principles have been even more important in our legislative work. When you look at the digital rulemaking that the EU has advanced on further in the last couple of years, it's impressive. I mean, what we have done on platform economy with the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act is groundbreaking. It was a natural kind of next step for us because we had years of experience in the last mandate to work on self-regulatory kind of processes with the platforms. I was personally involved in the Code of Conduct against illegal hate speech and the Code of Practice against disinformation. We knew we would not stop there. We knew we had to put that into hard law, but now we're doing it. And we are doing it in a setup where the world is watching us, and they want to see whether we are not only good at kind of adopting laws, but actually also enforcing them. And the same for artificial intelligence, maybe the even more daring kind of, proposal, also well prepared with high-level groups, white books and everything. But here we are really the first ones to kind of to come up in the world with a proposal to kind of regulate the AI in the sense that we want AI innovation, but we want it in a trustworthy, human-centric way, so that we do not deepen the bias and the discrimination that exists in society, but rather kind of by design try to avoid that. And also to give you another example, or two more examples, the one is the e-wallet, the e-identity framework. This is, of course, to really make sure that everybody in the future, wherever they live in the EU, can fully participate in accessing public and private online services. For that, you need interoperable solutions at the EU level. And the EU wallet is a bit underestimated, but will make a huge kind of, step in that direction. And also to bring an element from the sustainability agenda, what we are doing with the eco-design regulation and the product pass to really have from the beginning in a digital way, to give access to the product sustainability. I think that's also important. And also when you go beyond legislation, I just wanted to mention, because of course the protection of the vulnerable, in particular of children, is also very important when we are talking about a digital transition and about your 13-year-old kind of daughter. Here, I think what we have done with the Better Internet for Kids Plus strategy to kind of also make a step further and ensuring that we kind of, bring everybody on board to help, that we use our Better Internet centers, safer Internet centers to really kind of bring also the information to everywhere, to the schools, to, of course, the parents' organizations to make sure that everybody knows about their rights. What's the next step? The next step is certainly monitoring and implementing. The implementation of that new digital rulebook has started. I'm spending a lot of my time every day in kind of the full enforcement of the rules on the DSA and the DMA. And I think when you look at what we have been doing ever since the rules came into application for the gatekeepers or for the very large online platforms, we're not shying away from our responsibility. We have already opened investigations against, 3 of the important platforms, X, TikTok, AliExpress. We have issued guidelines for the election integrity. We really want to make sure, especially for the upcoming European Parliament elections, we don't leave any stone unturned to make sure that we have thought about that, to be ready for whatever might happen, deep fakes, disinformation campaigns, or whatever you can think of. But we are not alone in this. And we will also not make progress on the principles if we act only from a silo and the ivory tower of the European Commission. We need to see that in a team effort. This is always work in a decentralized way, also with the member states. That happens on the implementation of most of the rules. Even on the Digital Services Act, we have a board with the national digital services coordinators that support our work. We need that. They are closer to the ears of the citizens. They get the complaints. That's how it should work. It has to be a teamed-up approach. And the third partner in that is, of course, all the other stakeholders, whether it's civil society, whether it's even business. We have to work with everybody to get them on board in this endeavor, because only then can we push also at the national level, at the local level, with the knowledge from everybody, because very often they are better kind of equipped to equip us again with that information. And we can push, for instance, in the digital decade process to kind of, move the member states in the right direction. Is this good enough? By far not. I think it's only the beginning of the process. I will want to share with you a rather shocking Eurobarometer study that we have just launched, and we just got the first outcomes. It will be used for our digital decade reporting in June. But for the sake of this kind of occasion, I was shocked to read that only 50% of the Europeans actually consider that their digital rights are well protected. Whereas in the world, the people would always argue that look at Europe, and Europe is so much advanced. So something is going wrong here in terms of, awareness building, and we're not bringing that message across enough for the citizens to really fully engage in that. When we are working on our international work, which we are also doing with partners, we see that we're inspiring and that we are seen as an example, the famous Brussels effect, but we really have to do our homework to make sure everybody knows that here. So I think that's really something that we need to get ready also and right also in the next mandate, to really kind of make sure that people understand better that they have an online protection on the basis of these new laws, and that we are there to kind of enforce it for them. So I want to end with that and really thank you for this occasion to talk with many experts about this, and to hopefully kind of be united in this effort, not only to praise the principles of the digital rights, but also to make an extra effort wherever we are in our roles to pass that message even stronger, so that maybe the next survey will have a better kind of outcome on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Renate, for setting the scene quite clearly there. Lovely. Okay, next up we're going to up the tempo just a little bit more. So we've given our 5 next panelists 5 minutes each to make what we call impulses or a statement, right? And I shall be using my high-tech warning sign for you, right? Let's keep the tempo high. So afterwards, they will all join the panel. So audience, best keep your questions for then. We will open the floor later on for questions to you as well. But our first sort of statement comes from Bernd Lange, who as an MEP represented the people in this whole process, right? So as he was a chief negotiator on the digital rights and principles. So give him a warm welcome, Bernd Lange, MEP.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for organizing this event. When I was a young boy, I thought Wild West has to deal with cowboys and tracks and so on. This was wrong. I learned in the last years Wild West has to deal with around about 6 big companies in Silicon Valley. And there was an idolatry of freedom of the digital sphere. No regulation is necessary. You can read some quotes. And even more, Mark Zuckerberg mentioned what is the principle of our work? Grow and break. So they are calculating even to break the legal framework. And this was one of the motivation to go with the Commission and the Council for this digital rights declaration. And we spend a lot of energy and engagement in this because we want to guarantee our citizens that online and offline is the same regarding illegal and legal action. And you can imagine that around about 9 committees were engaged in this work in the European Parliament, because a lot of different committees have some word to say in this direction. And I'm quite proud that we managed to improve the declaration, specifically regarding also the working conditions of people and the digital rights in the working framework and so on. So a lot of engagement and time, and specifically my assistant Laura, sitting here, was really deeply engaged and did a wonderful job. And now, how to deal with this declaration. And even we didn't spoke about that. One of the first elements I want to mention is we need to communicate this declaration to our people. And I was also astonished. Only 50% of the people are feeling really covered by a trustful regulation in the digital sphere in the European Union. And I guess we should really try to convince them that this is the guiding principle for our work in different legislation. It's similar like the European Pillar of Social Rights. And if this is coming to the mind of the people, then of course we can really achieve a lot, and we can really be helpful in their secure environment. And of course, the situation that we have a lot of insecurity at the moment, not only in the digital field, but also in the social development, in the economic development, leads really to this right-wing populist movement. And one of this uncertainty is really also linked to the digital sphere. So really make the declaration more known. It's, I guess, one of the major tasks. And secondly, of course, the question of implementation. And if this is true, that are the guiding principles, then these guiding principles have to be also the founder of legislation. And I'm quite proud, and I really can underline what Renate said, on the DMA, and the DSA, the AI Act. By the way, in the AI Act, there's also a reference to the Digital Rights Declaration in. And of course, the proof of the DSA, for example, will be in the European elections. And I hope that we can really be proud on that at the moment where we can test whether the DSA can really guarantee our public environment free of fake news, of hate speech, and so on. And I'm quite convinced that we can use this in a proper way, and that we are willing to do it based on the principle of the declaration. And thirdly, of course, let's go global. I'm sure that to have really a perspective against this Wild West situation, we need a better understanding with partners globally. We have the TTC with the United States, and I guess it's really good to have a roadmap of trustful AI that we are really discussing in the TTC, the AI at workplace. So there are a lot of elements where we can work together based on the European declaration, and I guess this Brussels effect has some power. Look to the GDPR. So India has a similar regulation we have. So let's build on and try to convince as much as partners as possible to go in the same direction. Thanks a lot.
Lovely call to action. Thank you very much, Bernd Lange. I'm starting to get a sense of how complicated these things can be, right, as an outsider. And next up, we want to move sort of from the theoretical level to the practical level. So bringing also the view from like a local and a regional level, we have Jacques Hamande ready for us. Jacques is a Director General for Simplification, Digital Transformation for the Belgian Federal Public Service Policy and Support. Looking forward to hear what our host country is going to say today. Please give him a warm welcome. Jacques Hamande.
Good evening, everybody. It's always a challenge to be doing the third intervention when you have such a speech telling everything. Then I don't know what I was, I got notes from me. I got notes from my permanent representation. Please do not take screenshots. Then I can forget everything. Then suddenly I saw this paper, which is Let's Trust. And I said, oh, let's trust, that's a good idea. Maybe I have to talk about that. Then, you know, my life as a civil servant every day is I get questions. Is it possible? Is it safe to do that? How can we use it? What do you do with my data? Every day we are talking about services, we are talking about safety, we are talking about security, we are talking about transparency. We are finally discussing in concrete every day about what is in the declaration. Then as a civil organization, public services organization, what we do every day is just listen, not to my daughter only, but to all the citizens. We call it live events. What we do, and at Fort Boza, what we do is that simplifying life of citizens and companies. What we do should bring value to all of them, and by listening them, we will simplify our life. Then we're talking about concrete example. What we did, we took the initiatives about transparency, and we created a platform which is called My Data. What we do with my data is in general 4 pillars. First, we just expose all the information we are collecting and the treatment that we do about data, about companies and also citizens. It's about information, not the content of the information, but just which are the data treatment we do. 2, what we do is about all the authentic source, where we have really data about you, like national register, and then we just explain to citizens, that's exactly what we do with your data. And 3, which is quite an evolution or revolution, you can connect with your EID or with authentication keys, and you will look about the transactions that public services institutions are doing about your data. Why? For example, Ministry of Economy are asking, for example, Ministry of Interior some data. And you can have a look on my data. Oh, I was surprised that this month I got 12 requests. And suddenly you can see, oh, it's me. I was requesting information. And I see the information I was requesting about me, for example, a form I had to fill in, is just including my data, and I can, just making sure that it's correct. And the 4th thing is that going to the data we have in the government institutions about you. An easy example, you don't remember? Oh, a long time ago, I was giving my email address to the finance department, which is important. Oh, I forgot this is an old email, even the provider disappeared. It's good that if the state, which is not often the case, because we are on air, we don't do that too much. We want to pay you money back. Then it's an exception. But if we want to send good products and information like fines, we prefer to have your right email address, which is very useful. Then about information, about all the rights, it's very important. Then when we design digital solution, I think that we are just doing exactly what's in the declaration. We think about simplifying life. We think about designing solution to be inclusive and mobile. We design solution to be secure and getting by design security, of course, and data protection and privacy. And obviously, we make sure that you are happy about that, which is something we do on a regular basis. Then one of the last time I was visiting DG Connect, it's not so far from here, I entered in the building and I saw the declaration on the wall. And I said, this is nice, I want to have a copy, just a big copy. Because in my office, I also come with posters to remind the colleagues, please think about this, think about that. And sometimes developers, I don't know, yes, I'm on air, this is very embarrassing. You don't have authorization to broadcast this part. But developers, we are often like that, And sometimes we forget to look far. And when we look far, we have to take context of everything. The message here is that when we develop things, if we would like to build trust, we have to make sure that we take into account those principles. Then thank you very much to all the member states, to the Commission, the Parliament, that work together. And as I heard just before from the different speakers, is that let's make sure that it's not only about communication, that we know it, but we make sure that we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you very much. This is turning to be a feisty event. Very good. Actionable. We like it. Thank you very much. Talking about action, as someone who works with businesses regularly knows that a good strategy requires very good targets, and good targets often require quantification, right? So how does that work in the context of digital rights? So tell us more and everything about it. We've got Richard Gardiner here, who's the head of EU public policy at the World Benchmarking Alliance. So very much looking forward to that. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting us here today to Identity Valley. It's a pleasure to present. I also have a lot of notes, but I will keep it very simple for 5 minutes, telling you who we are, what we do, and why we're relevant today, and then during the panel discussion, willing to go into as much as you want. As was said, we basically engage with business. So what we do in a nutshell is we're a non-profit based in the Netherlands looking at the sustainability performance of the top 2,000 companies in the world. Not the largest, not the biggest, but the most impactful. How we do that is we look at sectors in climate, urban, digital, nature and biodiversity, as well as food and agriculture, and increasingly now the finance sector. And what we're trying to see is what is the current trends we see around sustainability, what is the potential gaps in areas that have to be covered, regulation, guidance, etc., what's the peer-to-peer learning, and how do we bring all that together in a multi-stakeholder environment. And based on the first three speakers, that seems to be something pretty prominent in the digital space. In other areas, maybe not so much. And so how we're doing at the moment is we have 7 transformations, doing about 9 benchmarks. This event is pretty topical because, and I don't know if my other colleagues online are listening, but digital is probably our second most prominent benchmark, I would say. Corporate human rights benchmark is the longest and going. But the digital one, because of the sector it covers, how fast moving it is, and how interactive everyone is in it. Sometimes it's quite difficult to get people to talk about certain supply chains, certain risks, not about digital. And in that sense, what we do is very transparent, very open. We develop a method, we develop a core group of companies. In this case, we do 200 digital companies in the digital space. We develop a methodology in a multi-stakeholder way. We publish everything online. Then we rank all of the companies, share with them their rankings. They come back to us, we talk. We ask them why this, why that, but them to understand. I mean, normally how those conversations go is they might come back to you and say, well, I don't agree with this. We then go back and say, well, actually, it's based on that, if you look at the rest of the industry. And then they usually go, thank you very much. I can take that internally. I can get the sign-off at higher level. I can get more resources. I can work on things. So it's usually quite a productive conversation. And then we publish. The rankings themselves are interesting, but what's better is the aggregate data, the trends you see, the landscape. That's much more interesting. And in terms of the digital benchmark, the reason it's so interesting is we do 200 companies across telecommunication services, internet, semiconductors, etc. We've got about a third hardware, a third telecommunication, and a third IT software. So it's really the whole landscape. Also in the digital space, as compared to some of our other work, it's truly global. So you will see the companies that we cover predominantly tend to be headquartered in the EU or North America. Here it's everywhere. Africa plenty, South America, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, etc. So it truly is a global space to be working in. And then concretely how we're doing it for our digital inclusion benchmark is we're looking to rank and rate companies around 4 core values to their sector and one that runs through everything. So we're looking at the access to digital technologies, how that's working and how it's used, the improving all levels of digital skills, so be it internal or external projects that they run, the trustworthiness and the use by mitigating risks, so that trust point that was raised earlier, and also the open and inclusive approach to ethical innovation, so future-looking, future-proofing it. And then to the point of putting people at the centre, of all of our benchmarks that are specific indicators, the one thing we have at the centre is the core social indicators. And that's basically around respecting human rights, promoting decent work, both internally and externally in the supply chains, and acting ethically. And I think when we look at all of that, what we're seeing basically in the digital space is when we publish key findings, everything's online, you can see it all there. But just the 2 things I'd highlight is one is increasingly from all of the multi-stakeholder things we do, and it echoes the point earlier, we have to put people at the centre. So even when we were designing the benchmark, there was pressure put on us to make sure those core social indicators were there. And they're key for areas like child digital rights, ethical art, AI, and also data privacy. And it was how is this really affecting people on the ground? And so they had to be put in, and actually the weighting we give is about 20% the value of the benchmark, which is quite important. The other 2 areas that are probably of interest is that improvement was quite quick in the beginning for digital companies, quite new space, but that tends to be tapering off. So what's the next step? Which actually goes to one of the more interesting findings, and I can end here, is that it's one of the sectors where stakeholder engagement can really get change. So if you think of some of the more established sectors like oil and gas, extractives, etc., long tradition, maybe not willing to engage too much. In this one in particular, engagement of investors, civil society, governments sees pretty rapid change. So we've gone from having about 10% of the companies we benchmarked having an ethical AI policy to about a quarter in about 3 or 4 years. And they're the largest one. That's quite a big progression. So if you consider how responsive they are, be it through laws, declarations, etc., it's something that there's a lot of space to work in. So yeah, that's basically where we are at the moment, and happy to take the rest of the discussion in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. I feel some sort of conversions coming up already. Thank you very much, Richard. Next, we have someone, well, from the legal side of things, really. I guess AWO Agency is a law firm that aims to shape, apply and enforce data rights. Yeah, so we're very lucky to have their senior policy associate here to enlighten us with their vision. Please welcome Laureline Lemoine.
Hi, thank you for having me. So basically, at AW, we've been working with the policy team on several pieces of legislation this past few years, and we really try to shape the digital policy in the public interest. And our law firm in the UK is specialized in data protection, and we represent users against a big tech company when they have complained about their data rights. And so in our work, we haven't really engaged with the Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles, but we definitely see the value of such an instrument, mostly because it reminds us that fundamental rights are central when we talk about the digital economy. And it's especially important because when push comes to shove during negotiations, when we draft legislation, then these rights in principle are not always getting the upper hand, especially when there are other interests at stake. And because legislation actually has a more concrete impact on fundamental rights, we really hope that the Commission, the Parliament, but also the Council can really remember this declaration when they are drafting, negotiating, and implementing tech legislation in the EU. But we also see the declaration as a very important diplomatic tool when it comes to discussion and shaping partnership with international partners, as was already mentioned. And basically in our work, we've seen that the recent legislation at EU level has actually done justice to the principle in the declaration. And I'm thinking of the DSA because I've been working on the DSA for the past 3 years. But basically, it's really interesting how the DSA operationalize some of the principles that are in the declaration, and especially when it comes to risk assessment and risk mitigation measures. The declaration also advocates for transparency and accountability, which are very core principles that are addressed in the DSA. And another interesting point, I think, is how the declaration has been used by stakeholders. Specifically, we've seen that European telecom operators have been using the declaration when they argue for a fair share, the fair share contribution to their infrastructure costs, and they've been using it in their lobbying efforts, in statements, but also interviews. And so I guess it will be very interesting to see if and how the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council, they're all going to use the declaration and how they're going to interpret the words of the declaration in those negotiations. Because the declaration also aims to balance various interests. We have fundamental rights, of course, but also innovation, security, and so it seems a bit challenging to achieve this balance in practice when you have different stakeholders with competing interests and also competing interpretations interpretations of those principles. So we're really looking forward to see how it's all gonna come to play. But I guess maybe my final point is that because the declaration is not fully directly applicable and cannot be invoked by citizens, I think one of the best ways to achieve some of the political objectives that are in the declaration is to ensure effective enforcement of EU legislation, because that's where also the concrete rights are enshrined, and that's where a citizen can actually use those rights and be active. And so it's especially important because we're at the end of this legislative cycle when we saw a lot of tech-related legislation being adopted, DSA, DMA, Media Freedom Act, the AI Act, and not only that, but also the GDPR, which gives concrete, actionable rights to citizens, and we've seen maybe a lack of enforcement, sadly. So we really think this is also part of the bigger picture. And beyond effective enforcement, we also think that it's important to strengthen the application of fundamental rights through other methods. It could be class action mechanism or capacity building for regulators in courts at national level, but also maybe the promotion and the development of a sustainable civil society. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Laureline. You did make me feel very old because you're the only one using a digital tool to take your notes there. Thank you very much. Anyway, a final statement before we jump into the panel comes from someone who calls himself a data sovereignty enthusiast. So in that capacity, he's currently a director at Capgemini, the global consultancy firm. So looking forward to hear what that side of the spectrum brings to the conversation. Again, give him a warm welcome. Peter Kramer.
Thank you, thank you. I'm Peter Kramer. I'm a director for data sovereignty solutions at Capgemini. Capgemini, of course, is the biggest, most European IT consulting and technology consulting company in the world. That means that since we're European, we identify with European values and we take pride in trying to enact all that comes with European legislation and all the principles that go with it. And when we talk about data sovereignty, that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So I'd like to preface this by saying when I say data sovereignty, I mean the ability to make self-determined and well-informed decisions about where your data is stored, how it is stored, by whom, for what reason, for how long, against what remuneration. Because that, in the end, is the ability to say, yes, I want to contractualize with this person or not. And the ability to say no there is quintessential in enabling all of these principles that we've heard and discussed right here this day. And values and principles are all good and nice, but we're also a market actor, which means we're driven by the market, and the market is definitely calling for sovereignty, for principles, for digital rights. And by the market, I don't just mean the public sector, who of course are representing citizens and citizen interest group, but also market actors that are profit-driven. We can see this in terms of data spaces, which are also heavily pushed and incentivized by the European Commission. We are part of the Data Spaces Support Center and the Simple, the smart middleware platform, which aims to make data spaces more accessible. Data spaces are only a tool in achieving data sovereignty and, well, bringing to life these principles that we think are absolutely reasonable. But there's an 830 billion euro market for data in Europe next year. And we firmly believe this market should be bigger. But the market is not bigger because we cannot get more data into the market. Because a lot of companies say, data sharing, I can see how that might be useful, but we don't know what's happening with our data. There's a lot of fear of loss of control. There's a lot of questions around secondary usage of data and who actually gets something out of this. This is tightly connected with platform economies and these 6 companies that we've heard mentioned today already. And we believe that there should be an alternative to this. It's probably not one European company that acts as a hyperscaler of sorts, but we need to be able to look at the data value chain, which begins at data generation, either by IoT sensors or by manual input, and it ends somewhere at results being handled and produced by AI. And along this value chain, there are certain steps that you will have to complete in one way or another. And if we say we want data sovereignty, that means for us, we need to be able, as citizens and as companies, to be able to make the decision, for this one step, I want to work with this partner, for the other one, I want to work with the next one. We don't want that locked-in effect that will only lead to technical debt and to a lot of questions when you try to migrate your services to another provider. And that isn't not to say that the market actors that we have in Europe, even though they occupy 85% of the cloud sector, for example, the cloud market at this point, they're not bad. On the very contrary, they're very good actors. They're not in the position they're in right now because they came up first. They are really good at what they do. But their business model is heavily reliant on, well, keeping you on their platforms. And from a commercial perspective, that's very reasonable. It's one of the principles of any digital economy is try to get the people on your platform and make them stay as long as possible so you can extract profits. But it's not the future of the internet as we perceive it. The internet, a couple of decades ago, was founded on the concept of federation and decentralization. And when you look at the cloud landscape that we see now, it's very much on the opposite end of it. It's very much centralized on these few actors. And we love working with them, but we still believe as a French company with a very much big market in Europe, we believe that we should be able to have European actors enforce these principles and regulations that we see in Europe. And we need to make sure that they come to the forefront. None of these individual actors will be able to provide one single offering that can rival those for the Americans and the Chinese. But when we combine them, I think we can make a very good effort at being competitive and even outranking them. Because in the end, the question is innovation, and innovation comes by people working together. From ecosystem to ecosystem is a slogan that we've heard a lot, and we believe that data economy in Europe has to be based on European values, and it has to be done by those sharing our values, which is most likely Europeans. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Lovely. I was going to say, don't run away too far, because we're going to go around straight into our panel. And I think we've got even an order for you. If you could take your seats roughly in this order, it helps the audience remember who you are. So if you could take your seats, I briefly need to introduce a little game that Identity Valley wants to play with you. They have a book recommendation for you. So for the first 3 questions, which I'll be asking at some point, you get a book from Identity Value, right? And Jutta will sign a personal declaration in it. Yeah? Cool. So this is roughly the order. You're all set. We got some microphones. Cool. Yeah, that's very clever people, right? They're all lined up here. Yeah. Good. Again, thanks again for your beautiful introductions. I think that, to me at least, as a slight outsider, sets the scope. And it's pretty broad, right? So what I was trying to do to try and make it as applicable as possible, I'd like to give you, each of you, give me one, or give the audience one specific example of something. When was the last time that you recently had an encounter with something digital where you went, we really need these digital rights and principles in place and actionable as quick as possible? And I'll give you 20 seconds to think about that, because it's not an easy question. I'll go first. For me, it was quite sort of recently when I got a notification again of my daughter who signed in with her Gmail account into a thing called Character AI. And I wasn't sure what to do with it. Like, what kind of data does it use? What can I see? What can't I see? Should I be the strict dad now, or should I have a conversation? And how do I have that conversation? So I felt quite sort of insecure, and I'm pretty good with these things. So that was my example where I now think these kind of rights and principles and actionable things would help me for that. So I would like to hear an example, again, something where you go, we need this thing in action sooner rather than later. Peter, I'm going to go with you first. Yeah, that's on.
This thing is on. It's a bad example because it highlights how we've been spoiled in a bit by the actors that are on the market at the moment. I have a phone by one of the huge providers from the US. It starts with a G, and when you search for something, and it's an address, it usually used to connect you right away to its maps services. And it doesn't do that anymore. And at first, I was really annoyed by it because it's very convenient.
Yeah.
But of course, it shows you why they would do it. It's platform economies, try to keep you in their services. So even though at first I thought, oh God, why are they doing this to me? It's obviously the exactly right response to this platform economy.
Yeah.
I have to be able to make the decision, yes, I want this or not. And I need to be able to understand what's the reason of why they do it? What do they get out of it?
Yeah.
And if they can't do that, well, then I'm not going to say, yes, please use my data as you wish. So that was something that I found annoying but awesome.
Yeah. Lovely example. Again, I tried to get an idea of the scope here and immediate applicability for people. I'm joining to the other side of the table, Bernd. When did you have a recent experience where you went, yes, the rights and principles?
A good friend of mine is a visual creator for film, for movies, also Star Wars and so on. He's working hard, and now AI-driven visual effects are coming on the market, and it's not clear where it is, who is doing, what is the background of the AI. Perhaps they are using his work from the past, so it's totally unclear and it's not marked so far. So we need to really make clear who is the human being behind.
Yeah. I'm going to give a talk tomorrow for an audiovisual company, and I'm using that example exactly. So thanks for clarifying that. Laureline, I'm just jumping across. Again, just an example of, again, to show us the scope of this.
So,
Just
is it working? Yeah,
It's
yeah, sorry.
working.
So for me, I think I was recently with my little brother. He's a teenager. He's like 13, and he's obviously on TikTok. I mean, so am I. But like, I don't know. We're scrolling on TikTok, the two of us, and at some point on his feed, I could see some kind of like. I mean, we obviously do not have the same feed. It's personalized to him, and the algorithm definitely know that he's a man and that he's quite young. And I could see some kind of disturbing content, or like not illegal content, but like a bit harmful and like in a very social way. But I was a bit disturbed by this. I was like, oh wow, he's so young. He can be influenced so much by this. He spent hours on it, and I felt a bit sad. I was like, oh no, we really need to like do something and not just like try to grab the attention of like children and just yeah.
Again, it shows again the two different sort of incentives of people to do that. So lovely, thank you very much. Renate, there's a system to this.
I mean, I told you I'm working a lot on the DSA enforcement, and I'm quite proud about the steps that we have taken. But over the last couple of days, I was confronted also in a personal kind of context a lot with this new kind of TikTok Lite kind of thing, with the new voucher system, the rewarding system, when you kind of stay longer. So the longer you stay on screen time, the kind of the more you get rewards. And I really couldn't believe
like the
my
fact to start
eyes
laughing.
because I thought that by kind of sending a lot of requests for information, by opening an investigation, where actually we get responses, and I was flabbergasted by the fact that they hadn't even apparently realized that there should have been a risk assessment to be done before even kind of developing that feature. So we will have to react again. But I was it was a little bit of a depressing moment where I thought that, well, I mean, if you are already under supervision to that extent, wouldn't you have thought about that in a different way? But it shows how much we have to keep on our toes to, even if we make statements, it just never stops.
Again, thanks for the lovely example. It makes it extremely tangible. Jack, I'm sure you have a good example.
I was really nervous because I said, who will be the last one, Richard or myself? And we need to be creative. Then Richard, I apologize. Then I was checking the quickly all the let's say the declaration. I said, I need to example, tick the box, yes, AI, yes. Then inclusion. Then when, as a public administration, what is very key for us to be successful is to make sure that we have no one left behind. And this is really crucial. 7% of the population not connected, and about 30 to 45% telling, I'm not really comfortable, I don't have the skills, so I don't trust. This is why we did a Connect to program. First-line civil servants are helping citizens to activate their authentication keys, and they are also using EIDs to connect to all public platforms. And you know what is key? And I think we were right when we were talking about the declaration. Let's make sure that we are inclusive. And when you see a smile from someone vulnerable and discovering the light of being connected and trusting, it's so nice.
Yeah, cool. Lovely example as well. Thank you very much. Richard, can you add to that from your personal experience?
Sure. I mean, since the theme seems to be daughters, I set myself a goal of, before my first daughter was born, I would leave Facebook, because I had no interest of sharing personal information, nothing like that, and I did. And maybe it's a 2 point, so even just the interaction of people leaving these platforms is really difficult, very inordinately difficult to do. But since then, I have reappeared 4 times. And I've only known this by people telling me, oh, I added you to the group, why didn't you go to said event, or why didn't you do this, by things you don't say, well, I'm not on the platform anymore. Well, your photo is there, it's your name, there's about 4 variants of Gardner, with I, without I, AR, blah, blah. It's all there, it's all my photos that I thought were gone, and just the interaction with the platform is, I've given up. Yeah. I cannot get them. They keep telling me, no, this is a legitimate person. I was like, it's not. Yeah. There's no other way to say it. And they're very, so yeah, just that kind of experience of how putting the human at the center, how you interact with something that big, because it's really frustrating.
Now, you're going to take over already, right?
I need to say something to this because it's really important. I find this is a question of trust, and trust has to be verified. In the analog world, you can meet someone and shake his hand and assess the trustworthiness based on experience. You've been recommended by my dad or by my wife or by whoever. In the digital realm, that doesn't work. And that is why this is so tricky. So we need identity mechanisms that allow the identification and verification of identities without doubt. And that is what I'm really, really happy that we're finally getting around to getting up to EIDAS 2 with ID regulations for Europe.
Yeah.
Because any digital transaction, be they data-driven or not, will require identification. Yeah. And that is one prime example of that.
So you've already sort of sketched the problem. Now let's move forward. And you already answered that question, actually. So what would you see as sort of the key component or the key milestone that we need to reach or we need to do to move sort of this beautiful thing of paper and words on paper to something actionable? And you said identity as one thing. I take that as an answer to that question. I'm going to give it to Jack because otherwise he's going to say that he always has to answer last now. What would you see is the key element, the key component to move this into action?
This is terrible because this time I was hoping to be the last one.
Okay, you pass on the microphone.
Okay, then what do you think about this question? I'm sorry, I'm not the moderator. I think that sometimes we forgot to be a bit proud in public administration. We are making that real every day, or at least we hope, and that's about the citizen to do the evaluation. Then in every solution, and we push those programs to public institutions, digital inclusive design. We involve also association to come and to test our products. We engage with association to know what's these live events which are very important. And as I said before in the introduction, we are working very hard on the trust, because there is a big difference, I think, between, and you can challenge that, between public and private sector. In public sector, we don't have no space to miss the boat. If we miss it one time, it will be a huge challenge to recover. This is why we have to invest a lot to make sure that when you see public services, you trust it, you can recognize. And this is why also Belgium was really supportive, like other member states, about the EIDAS regulation 2.0. Very happy that we worked all together and that we achieved, because digital identity wallets, for example, are becoming reality. I have it in my pocket, but I can show it. But it's really very good that every citizen will have that in Europe, and with interoperability, that we can recognize that and we have trust.
So you've overlapped with identity, but you also covered trust and that idea of sort of catch the moment right now. I want to have sort of 6 or 7 of these kind of key principles that we need to cover. So up to the 4 remaining people to add some more. Renata, do you want to have, like, what's your the key element to take action, right? What
a key element
requirement?
A key element for me will be coherence of the different kind of, systems and regulations that we have. And here maybe let's take the example of minor protection, which is very, very strong. It has kind of come up in a lot of the examples that we heard. It's a kind of a huge political issue. There's a lot of pressure on a lot of national governments to kind of show that they are doing enough to kind of protect vulnerable, like minors, in this digital kind of transition. And here I think it's the combination of what we have. For instance, the DSA kind of suggests that we should have age verification systems, because of course when it comes to, for instance, access to adult kind of, content, only if you have the best technical solutions with an age verification system that is reliable and interoperable can you make sure that, there's a border, right? Any kind of parental control systems or gadget-based control systems can help, but that's where, for instance, the e-wallet in the future can help us. Because if we had that, then at least we would have potentially a solution wherever in Europe to kind of, say, this is a person not yet 18. So that would already help us. But that's never enough, because that's a much broader issue, about, bringing the information to the schools, working with the parents' organizations, making sure to be a strong enforcer, like I mentioned in the TikTok case, and probably there will be others to follow, because TikTok is not the only platform that is relevant for minors. So it's really a combination of the different tools that I think we have to web together, so that they are not kind of, contradicting each other, so that we see the strengths of pulling them together, but also ensuring when we implement them that they are coherent. I come from the data protection world, and there, for instance, I would hope in the future for much more synergies between the privacy legislation that we have, which I'm very proud of, but it's a little bit outdated in terms of, the technology that has developed since then, and kind of our new rule book. So that's what I see, connecting the dots, being strong on every end, and being coherent about a legislative framework.
Yeah. Now, there has technical implications because interoperability isn't just that easy, but maybe we can cover that a little bit later. I'll hold my thought there. A concept, again, Bernd.
I think
move forward.
reliability, so that the people really can trust on this declaration and the consequences. You mentioned the different practices on some legislation in the digital sphere in the member states. The GDPR is, of course, the prominent example. We just try to modernize this a little bit and make this reliable in all member states. But also in the declaration, for example, there is the freedom of choice if you want to have it in an online way or in an offline way. And we have several companies, banks, where it is not possible anymore to do it offline. So we have to make clear that these principles have really the power to get it through and have a reliable perspective.
Cool. Yeah, reliability, coherence, identity, trust and speed of action as well. Richard, you're going to say benchmarking and measurability.
Benchmarking solves everything. I mean, to jokingly tied to it, like it's moving from transparency of intent to transparency of action. So we have, to a certain extent, seen a growing amount of policies that are essentially one pages. They have the nice headlines of child protection or legal content, or etc. But there's no evidence they may actually be doing something. And so that just means not just showing what you've done, but actually creating the platform with the users, with those that engage with it, to actually help you identify the risks and deal with them. A few things like things like right to be forgotten, other concepts. They're great and they're devised in a multi-stakeholder way, but then the solution is done in a siloed way, or isn't done with people who actually engage with that platform. To go back to my Facebook example, it was a specific issue I had, but it wasn't the only one. And it may only have been with that platform. There could be different issues with other platforms. So doing that, and just in terms of benchmarking, what we see is that the highest ranking companies, which do infer a certain level of trust, are those that have the deepest involvement externally in their policies. So
can you clarify that?
So those that rank the highest in the benchmarks, it's implied that they have a greater level of trust with their user base, and they also are the ones that have policies with the greatest amount of external involvement, because they've actually gone out and done their due diligence shaping of them. And so there is a logic to be followed there. Now, again, nothing is perfect, but that's the kind of direction to go in. So, whereas those that don't rank as highly or are further down the line, they just have a transparency of intent. Oh, look, we have a policy.
So there's a collaborative effort that shapes these things in such a qualitative way that...
And evidence of it, so others know it's there. Not everyone has to be involved, but if you see it, then it will build trust. Oh, they're actually doing this, and there's evidence of it. Or if I want to, I could get involved in some way.
Yeah, lovely case. Lynn, what's your key element?
I think for me it's going to be transparency. And especially with DSA and the implementation of DSA obligations, we've already have access to a lot of transparency in terms of content moderation, access to data that I've never seen before, the number, of people who speak a language and are able to moderate for the platforms. But especially, I'm really looking forward to other obligations to be implemented, especially access to data for researchers will be able to apply, civil society, researchers, journalists to really get access to information on those platforms, but also the risk assessment and the audits when they will be published. There will be a lot of transparency for us to take action and to actually see what's under the hood, and that's very exciting.
Cool, lovely. I'm going to stay with you, Lorlin, because I want to tackle the subject or the topic of enforceability, and I think you're probably the best one to start with. Can you sketch a sort of roughly high level what can currently be done already from an enforceability point of view. And then afterwards, I'm going to ask the other people, what are the kind of challenges that you're running into, or what we will be running into, and then what can we do about it? But first from you, like, where are we right now, right?
So in terms of enforcement, I mean, we've seen that the Commission is really active, and it's really great to see. And as citizens, citizens can definitely also take action. We've seen that digital services coordinators have been appointed at member state level, not in every member state, but most of them. So some citizens are able to actually complain about DSA violation. And it's really important for citizens to have a voice and to actually bring issues and complaints to a regulator. And it's the same with DMA, but in another way. Like, you also have like maybe direct action obligations that could be interesting to see what can be done on that for citizens. But with GDPR, again, rights of actions. But I think the issue may be awareness of citizens. They're not really aware that they can actually complain and then can be vocal.
I was going to ask, we heard some quite
Yeah,
troubling
exactly.
numbers
That's
there.
the issue, because their mechanisms are there and are in place, and so we just need people to be aware of them and take action.
So what are the kind of challenges that we are running into or will be running into from an enforcement point of view? Floor open to anybody. Jack?
I was a regulator in a previous life. Then it was very interesting. Now I'm on the other side of the force. I would say enforcement is about you. It's about the voice of the user. And I think that the best way to make it real is first, as we heard several times, communication, know your rights, but express your rights. And I think that we have to move from, and obviously at the end, if we have to move from enforcement and negative and complaints to suggestion, proposals, and so on. This is really something different. Then obviously, after a long run in this cycle of the Commission, we have now a number of regulation and directives, and that is the time to go to implementation and measuring the outcome of them. This is very important for the future, and then to adjust them when necessary. But one of the key things to be successful is not about the negative way, it's about the positive way. Let's show the value and the outcome of everything. And you know, when people are fully aware, and that's why we didn't touch that in the, maybe about the declaration, is that it's starting from very early. Childhood, school, competencies. I know my rights from the beginning, I can express them, and I know how to do it. And not necessarily by benchmarking who is the good and the bad, because we're a bit sensitive, at least I am. It's about all the good things we can do. Then enforcement should be, of course, something important, but let's make sure that it's a positive spiral that everyone feel comfortable to engage.
Mm-hmm. Now, that makes me think enforcement kind of needs sort of bottom-up support, or needs like civil buy-in. I hear your point about education, but that takes time. So what are the kind of things that we can do sort of in the short term to get this kind of civil buy-in? It could be from any point, not just from
First of all,
governments.
I guess we can be happy that we are living in the European Union, and the European Union has the economic power to get enforcement. I can't imagine really that a small country would impose 2.2 billion euro against Google. Huh? And this is a strength for enforcement. But secondly, of course, we need also the necessary resources. I know for the DMA, we have around about 100 people looking for the enforcement of DMA. I guess it's not enough. So we have to reflect to strengthen the possibility, the resources, financial, personal resources, to have a proper enforcement properly.
Peter.
I think I mean, we don't work with citizens a lot. We work a lot with public administration. Can read Le Monde about this. We work a lot with the French government. I think it's important to put a positive spin on it and just tell the story of what's in it for me as a citizen for all of this. And I think this is not being done enough, to be quite honest. It's not really clear yet why it's a good thing that the platform with G has decoupled their search and their map engine. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to line out this more clearly for everyone to understand, because data literacy, digital literacy is not where it's supposed to be yet. We need more of this, of course, it's a process, we all agree on this. But I think laying out the benefit of it is important and really showing why the European Commission is taking this so seriously. And there's a global impact on this. Only this morning I had a call with an Australian province who are looking at all the regulation in Europe, and they say, oh, this is exactly what we want to enact this, how can you help us with this? And that is, I felt so good afterwards, because it showed us that we're doing the right thing in Europe. And it's not just because we're doing it because we're European and we're better than the others, we're just at the forefront of it. And I absolutely believe that in the rest of the free world, legislation like this will follow. Absolutely, no doubt about it.
Now, a lot of it's perception, and I think I might direct that at you, because a lot of it's perception. So how do we manage this kind of the muscle flexing big fines, which sort of, you know, not challenging them, but they get big attention. How do we manage that with my wife, who's got your experience? Like, why the hell do I need to click twice on Google Maps, and that extreme usability? How do we manage that perception? Because it's a perception thing. Oh, it's the regulation that says now I can't do this anymore. So how do we do that, Renat?
Yeah, I think there's a huge task for us to kind of communicate better, but I think I want to bring in also another element. If you look at the enforcement of, let's say, the generation of rules that we have been working on in the last couple of years, then this is a generation of rules, I would call them, it's the second generation of rules in the digital age, where we are looking at systemic kind of issues. So it's also not a quick fix. I mean, that's also the truth. You know, in the DSA, I cannot kind of, you know, take down an opinion because I don't like it. First of all, it's not a content moderation law. And then it's not about individual kind of incidents. It's about systemic risks for the society. Because we also should not forget that we want to keep the kind of the freedom of expression on the future of the internet and the openness of the internet. That's also important for open societies and democracies that we are. But, you know, what is interesting is that, so that is built in also to make these kind of, you know, second generation of digital rules relevant for the future, so that they are agile enough to react to the dynamic digital transition process where, you know, whatever you mean, you know, now the AI Act, the generative AI aspect in it is a very good example of that. We don't know yet all the answers, but we have to be able to act within that context or in the cybersecurity field because it's evolving. When you compare that, what I would call the first generation of digital rules, which is the GDPR, that I'm fond of because I was involved in it, but then that's a bit more static. And that's why, you know, I think we have to kind of also in the enforcement and kind of making sure that we have a coherent story and that we bring that home in a coherent way and can strongly communicate about it and make it clear and easy for citizens to understand. We have to kind of bring that more in line, because that's what I really see as a bit difference. Maybe also because we are really in this disruptive phase of technological developments, especially with AI, that is turning around upside down the way kind of potentially we work and kind of we do business. And in order to kind of be relevant there, I agree. We are very, you know, pioneering, but we also have to be relevant in 5 years' time on the basis of these rules, you know.
Yeah. Richard, I would like you to pick up on that and this kind of sort of juxtaposition between corporate speed or technology speed and the development, and I'm going to put it very black and white, forgive me, it's sort of but the slowness, and that's with a good reason, of policy making and law making. Now, one of the key themes of identity value is responsibility. So how could technology and businesses take responsibility internally to kind of, I don't know, balance this thing between moving forward, making profit, still, you know, manage these kind of laws or these kind of social statements that they make. This is how we want to do business. What can businesses do in that sense?
Sure. I mean, as I said in my presentation, it's one of the sectors we see a lot of businesses actually practically taking steps, because actually some of the laws are moving a lot quicker than laws in other traditional sectors because people recognize the speed of what's going. But even a concrete thing that businesses can do, and some are doing now, and to move it from the European to the global, but to tie together what was said about flexing the muscles, is that you're going to have the UN Summit for the Future in September, October this year, and they're going to discuss the UN Digital Compact. And so that basically is in a nutshell, a global set of norms that all businesses should sign up to and governments should sign up to in terms of trying to enforce or put in place measures like it. That is something that is not legally binding when agreed, but is a roadmap. But as it's in under the UN Global Compact, there's meant to be huge business buy-in. So you're basically acting like, if you've done something positive so far, could you actually present it in this and push for a higher standard? And then once it is agreed, and hopefully it should be, can you actively work with your government to implement it ASAP? Before, and that's before laws, before anything, but to bring in guidelines, other steps that can happen quicker. And to the point of where Europe's role is, because it's gone so fast and so far and is doing so much, that's a good place to show where the highest bar can be. It doesn't have to be the same for every region, but at least could dramatically improve things. Because ultimately, without global coherence, there is that safe harbor, as people always have. They will forum shop, they will find somewhere else. Data doesn't have a boundary. It's a bit like financial services where I worked before, you really have to do something.
Yeah.
So I think companies to actively involve in that process to start, and then the implementation of that quite quickly would be great, because in many jurisdictions, they won't see hard law for quite some time. Yeah. But they will have a global set of norms they can start to implement themselves and with their regulator.
Peter, do you want to add on that, particularly on the point of data and data sovereignty and the idea? You touched upon it in your talk about, we were joking beforehand, before the chat, like, oh yeah, people, your companies, they like to sort of keep their data. It's like, well, no, they'd like people to have their own data to an extent. So what can companies that deal with data, which is almost everybody, what kind of action can they take right now already to start moving towards these kind of principles?
The answer is a data strategy, of course. Data strategy that takes into account everything that is on the horizon that affects you, which is legislation, market, environment, technology, and business models.
And give me a percentage of companies that have that.
I think it's 32%. Yeah. But having a data strategy does not mean you know what to do with it. I mean, that's important too.
Give me a percentage of that.
It's a smaller number.
Yeah, okay, so there's room for improvement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I think it's important to line out that, of course, regulation and legislation will impact business models. I think there's no beating about the bush with this. The question that we have to ask ourselves, are the business models that are affected by this type of legislation those that we want? And personally, I'm a little bit torn on this.
Okay.
But most likely they're exploitative business models. And a lot of the data-driven business models of the past have been to the detriment of those who give their data. I mean, it's a basic data economy 101. It's you get data and you do something with it, and those that gave it to you, forget about them. And that is something that we don't want in Europe, because it's very one-sided. It's asymmetrical value generation, and it leaves those that give data, and in a lot of sense, that is citizens, it's small companies, it's startups, it's research organizations, public sector organizations that need to have the ability to participate in this on an eye-to-eye level. Yeah. And that is why we need data sovereignty. It's what I do. But in the sense, we need a framework in which to articulate this. And of course, interoperability plays a role, but it's not the most important thing. Compatibility is the name of the game, because you don't need interoperability between all the platforms that you work with, but you need to be able to work with different platforms, and that is what we currently don't have. Interoperability is way, way down the line, because why would Google cooperate with Microsoft?
Yeah, too much business secrets to be shared there. Yeah, okay. Now, I just want to move on to the idea of sort of how do we measure progress? Okay, we've got, again, beautiful piece of paper. We've got some ideas of actions. Then how do we measure whether we're doing the right thing right now by creating these declarations and creating these kind of panel chats? How do we maybe start with the policymakers? How do we kind of judge ourselves for making progress with this? Jack or Renate, yeah.
Can I just kind of add to, on the data, just because we haven't yet kind of mentioned, which is, I think, an important aspect of what we've been doing in the last years, which is kind of to develop the data strategy and to kind of, open kind of space with the Data Act and the Data Governance Act to a kind of a European model of data sharing, which, when you look, for instance, at the cloud switching, had already quite an impact, even though the Data Act rules are not even into place yet. I think, we are coming a little bit from looking at data market from the data privacy perspective only, and we have to kind of move from the data privacy perspective to the data use perspective in Europe, because I agree with you that data sovereignty is in the interest of the digital rights and principles. So I just wanted to add that. How to measure progress? I'm a strong believer in our Digital Decade Policy program. I think this is really, and Jack and I were working on this also together in the Digital Decade Board. This is really bringing member states and the European institutions together. This is something that goes also beyond one commission. This is a plan until 2030. The Parliament is also taking an interest in that. So I really hope that we can kind of travel also with that through the transition that we are all in, this political transition period that we're having in Brussels now. And, you know, so we are trying, it's an attempt, and we need help from other kind of, structures to kind of, measure in their way. But we are trying in the annex of the report to really kind of, tell a story about how we see the principles reflected in our actions. Okay. So my hope would be that when we have whoever is the next kind of commissioner we will be working with, that we kind of give that he or she immediately kind of this as a platform to kind of build on also for the coming years, because we have these principles, but we also have these targets, and we have to really make progress if we want to be in terms of digital innovation, digital connectivity, digital skills, by 2030. Because if we lose that digital decade, as our President von der Leyen has always called it, then we are really lagging behind in terms of the speed elsewhere in the world. Then we can have the best regulatory framework, but if we don't have the innovation accompanied with it, we're losing out. And we will always depend on the AI applications from elsewhere that has different principles, the connectivity kind of by the big hyperscalers that we probably should rather serve in the EU.
Jack, I'd love you to pick up on that from the frame of, well, the digital decade. I hear the terminology quite a lot. Digital is not going to stop in 2029 or 2030. To the contrary. So how do we ensure continuity from a policy point of view? What does the next Commission need to do in order to just flip this over 2030 and add another 50 years or whatever to this vision? What needs to happen?
Oh, sorry, we have a technical issue. It's too bad that you didn't hear my answer. It's an embarrassing question, and I don't remember I got this one. We are working, of course, on the Council conclusion at time we speak, and that we will present next month. Let's say, just to come back on what Renata said, and I think that one of the things we have to continue is the Digital Decade Board. And I think one of the key things we are discussing, and that's really a very exciting journey all together with the member states, it's about, we discussed quite a lot about the indicators, but not the indicators for the indicators, because we discussed about input indicators, output indicators, and also outcome. Then one of the key things about the future is that we have to maintain a number of initiatives across the different cycle to make sure we can achieve that. And dare to challenge ourselves where we have to tune the direction to make sure that we achieve the goal. Then that will be the main thing. And I will repeat myself, we had sometimes some member states than others have more ambitions than others regarding measurements, comparison, and so on and so on. One of the key things is that we all engage together, and we will enter in this cycle of sharing much more and focusing together, and also initiative that we didn't discuss today. And I will say that it also initiative from the Commission, we're working more together. And if we would like to achieve all of that, including the declaration, make it real at European level, is working multi-country. And multi-country in terms of projects, multi-country in terms of goals, multi-country in terms of ambition. And of course, within the European framework.
Cool, thank you. Laureline and Bernd, you obviously represent the people in this whole thing. You've talked about sort of, people claiming and challenging the laws. What for you sort of is the KPI or the result that we should use as this should, when the declaration is successful, what should be measurable from a citizen point of view? Maybe start with you, Laureline.
I would say that success would be not going to court over, it would be actual concrete changes from the companies, changing the user experience, changing the harmful practices without going to court, and without having to impose fines, but just I mean, maybe that's wishful thinking.
No, but it's a KPI,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
that's success
would be
ratio.
it,
Yeah,
yes.
no.
And if there is cases going to court, if decisions are challenged, if we need to go then to have really strong interpretation of the law, so that we also have really good then jurisprudence for later.
Yeah. Amount of court cases as a KPI. I quite like that actually. Bernd.
No, I think we have to communicate the concrete examples where the declaration and the legislation is helping the people. Yesterday I spoke to a dealer who was active on the Amazon marketplace, and he had a lot of trouble regarding the profit, but also copying some products from him and produced by Amazon themselves. And now we can demonstrate with European legislation he was respected, and we have a level playing field in this area as well. Or that the Works Council is now able to control the conditions where new people were required, recruited also with AI, and so on. These positive elements we have to communicate and demonstrate. You can trust in that indeed our society, we respect your rights also online. Cool.
Great. I'm going to have one more question, and then we're going to open up to the floor for a couple. Richard, one for you, actually, because you've mentioned the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not an expert, but as far as I know, there's not that much mention of digital in the SDGs. Is that a problem? Is that an opportunity? Should they align? How can they strengthen each other?
True. So there's not specific mention, but then to the UN Digital Compact, that they're trying to basically bring in what is digital's specific role under the existing SDGs. So taking it as a quote-unquote new sector, maybe one that wasn't around when wasn't as prominent when the SDGs were doing it. So they have a human rights responsibility, they have a climate responsibility, workers, etc. Even a part I'm more familiar with is the physical side of all these companies: water usage, data centers, mineral extraction, all of those kind of things. Which I've spent the last 5 years working on corporate due diligence. So that's kind of yeah, exactly. So that's another side of it too. So it's probably aligning appropriately and proportionately where the sector fits with what's there, and not presuming that they have the exact same responsibilities as the industries was more intended for, if you see what I mean, and going through that. And a lot of what's in the Digital Compact tries to do that and tries to bring them together. And then just actually a word on measuring success as well. I mean, we deal with concrete metrics like how many times complaints are made, it's in the press, blah, blah, blah. But I think how you could measure success true is there a predictability of process? Because this is not about risk eradication completely. Problems will always come up, and that's what we've done in all the due diligence processes. But is there actually trust that if it comes up, there's a way to deal with it? There is access for citizens, for groups, for whatever, could be courts, could be something. Because that's normally what people want. To have an absolute eradication of the problem completely is fine, but you're never going to get to that 0%.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, finger up, question. Who has a question for our... There's a book at play. Yeah. There's microphones going around as well. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, question.
Hi, Marcus from Identity Valley. I just saw, and I'm really interested, I'm completely happy to hear about the legislation and that everything going towards the digital direction. But did we learn something from all the sustainability discussion? Because there was a lot of regulations, there was a lot of communication, but also, in my opinion, a little bit of miscommunication, because it kind of developed towards a counter behavior in people, really not going with sustainability things, really going against it and kind of mistrusting democracy in the end. So is there something we...
Can we learn something from that?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay, yeah, good question. You want to speak up on that? Or anyone in specific you have in mind to answer?
Quite keep it open.
Not Jack this time. Peter, you have a go.
I have an individual theory on this.
Sure, let's hear it.
Sustainability is something that will always impact economies, and economies have a lot of impact on the media landscape, and that is why sustainability has sort of been misappropriated by certain actors in this economy. And that is probably why we need more digital legislation that makes sure that we don't get fake news online, and that we can make sure that information that we get online is verifiable and true, whatever true means. But I think it's important that we need to have verifiable sources, that we can, coming back to the sustainability things and climate change discussions, that we can verify that certain data is without doubt. It's just scientific fact, and that is probably a thing that we need to make sure we get
One
right
could
this
argue
time.
that the parallel, you mentioned sustainability has a big economic impact. Digital legislation has a huge economic impact as well. So we should learn that lesson from creating a certain reputation around digital rights.
Well, digital legislation doesn't per se restrict economies, at least not in my understanding, and on the contrary,
To the contrary, I would
it
imagine.
incentivizes data economy, especially in Europe. Whereas sustainability legislation, at least perceived, did
Perception, yeah.
harmfully impact the economy,
Yeah.
old economy, that is.
I feel Renata wants to pick up on that.
Well, I think it's a good point to be aware of, and I think it's all about balancing. For instance, I mentioned it earlier. If we have to be careful not to be pushed into the censorship kind of area. So I think that's a debate that I'm confronted with a lot when kind of especially now in the context of the election integrity work we're doing on the DSA. This is not about us judging as minister of truth, what opinion we like or not like, that I think that's a balancing act, to explain that it's complex. So you have to take a minute or two to really kind of, look at it from the different angles, but it's worth the effort. And I think the other is, indeed, there is a user experience. There's also a user reality, a user kind of, habit. And I think in our discussions with the platforms or with the gatekeepers, they're very smart in kind of, also when they communicate that, this is all to protect security, or this is all because, they have wonderful systems that go from A to Z and that kind of help them to navigate through this. So I think that's an element that we also in the balancing doesn't mean that we should shy away from enforcing actions, but if we don't get that right, and all of a sudden, there is a kind of, development out there that, look, this is Europe, and I can't do this anymore because of Europe. I think we saw a little bit of that already in the phase we were in just now on the DMA with the gatekeepers kind of, the decisions, where do we go, because we saw change. We see change in the platforms, both on the basis of the DSA and the DMA. Of course, it's not good enough. It's not yet the kind of the business models that we want them to kind of develop instead of what they are doing today. But, we have to be smart also, taking into account how easily it can flip to the other side. So I think it's actually quite a good advice to kind of not to forget that experience from, let's say, the Green Deal.
That definitely deserved a book. So remember, right? Questions deserve a book. Right? The gentleman there. So yeah, he was first. Sorry. We'll do the one more final one. Yeah. Please tell us quickly who you are, what you do, what the question is, who you're from, and who you want to get the
Good
answer.
evening. My name is Christoph Kolb. I'm from Wahnsinn Design from Cologne. I'm a designer. And my question is, we heard a lot about punishing companies who don't follow the faith or the laws. But what does the panel think of incentivizing by rewarding companies? Because I believe there are many companies and people who want to follow these steps to honor the digital rights and the human rights of people, and maybe incentivizing by rewarding these companies, either by promotion, by access, easier access, maybe by money, of course. Do you see ways there, or do you see the potential there as well?
Good. Thanks. I like the incentive question. You talked about positivity. Do you want to flip on that, Jack? You said about being positive in your answers, or anyone?
I will be quite short. When about incentivize, I think that public administration will play a role there, and for example, by doing very good tendering process and e-procurement. And one of the things we try to embed now in all the procurement activities we have is obviously to integrate principles and it's a way for us to ensure that the market will behave in the right way. Then it's not necessarily the reward, as you mentioned, but it's a way to, let's say, invite and or stimulate really strongly the market to behave in line with. And we do it for several subjects, and obviously respecting digital rights, respecting rights in general, or sustainability principles is very important for us. And I would say that we can do two other things that we try to do as public institutions is also try to stimulate the knowledge on the demand side or the user side about you have to be aware of this, that it's your rights, and then, of course, then you can influence behaviors of players, market players, by also behaving in your choice. And I think one of the principles in the declaration is also freedom of choice. Let's keep and protect that. And also, please act with this power you have in terms of demand and supply.
If I could add, I think one interesting potential follow-up to an incentive approach lies in the area of certification. Because I think that's, for me, especially when you look at the cyber security world, that's for me a kind of a built-in agenda that, you know, when you have, you kind of give a label to kind of, you know, companies who have security by design, privacy by design, you know, you can kind of decline it accordingly. But I think that's a very strong tool that is very well known from other policy areas, and where we simply didn't have the time to do that. But, you know, for instance, maybe that in the cyber world, this is already a built-in agenda, and I think that can be an interesting, you know, incentive-based approach.
So I'm a little bit skeptical because we are dealing with fundamental rights in the digital sphere, but also ILO Labor Convention or the UN environmental standards. We adjust the due diligence legislation with fundamental rights. And I have no really sense that some companies are really stick to these fundamental rights and some other companies not. That's not in the interest of the people and the environment, and it's also not a fair competition. So fundamental rights have to be guaranteed from all companies.
Thank you. Final question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, everybody. My name is Seliman Margan, and my question is about the three goals that you would or could achieve during this year. It's a bit general, but could you tell us more about
Actually,
that?
I'm gonna frame that question to the end in a slightly different way, and that might take us a little bit less time. I'm just aware that we're going to be running out of time. I like your question, but I'll cover it. Okay? You get the book anyway. That's bribery. No. Do you have a short question? I think so. Yeah. Okay. Shout. And then we're going to wrap up and go for drinks.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm Daniele Sabato from realisation. We talked about business models, right? Attention-seeking business models. And my question is really, do you foresee big tech companies adopting alternative business models? Are there alternatives available also for big tech companies?
Pick one person that you can, Oh, Peter's already answering. Okay. Yeah, it's obvious. Okay.
The answer is yes. We already see this. I mean, if you look at the Amazon Sovereign Cloud, it's a direct response to European legislation and the sovereignty movement that we see here. It's a cloud that's hosted in Europe according to all our European regulations, which is only administered by European citizens. So that's a direct response to this regulation, and tons of other business models will follow suit. Absolutely, 100% sure.
You get a book as well, because I got a spare one, so I read it already. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to cover your question in a slightly different way. But if I take one thing away from this, it's like, well, lot of stakeholders involved, a lot of need for alignment. So I would like you to finish with one sort of 20-second statement each, and it answers the following question. It's currently Monday, April 15. What is the one thing that people in the room can do this week to start moving in this direction that we want? Okay, maybe by the end of the month, and let's be slightly more pragmatic, but one piece of action, not a vision, not a principle, but a piece of action that people can do in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We'll start from right to left. It's easier. Yeah, from you.
The 2-week horizon is
Yeah,
that's
sure.
tricky. It's really tricky because I wanted to end with something else. It's the challenge that won me the book at the last event, which was the call for lawmakers and all public sector participants and actors to start buying European products. This is the public sector is the biggest industry in Europe, and if the public sector doesn't procure European products, why should anyone else? So I think this is an important thing to make. Why is the European Commission buying Microsoft products? And I'm not saying Microsoft products are not good, but they're not European.
So that could be the call to action. The next 2 weeks, someone will revise that list. Okay, clear one. Okay, thank you very much, Peter.
I would say maybe just learn about your rights, your digital rights, and take action and provide evidence to the regulators. Complain, just be loud.
Complain. Yeah, I like that one. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. No, I think it's a good one. Jack.
I would say, one, please spread the words. You know, spreading the words, being a community that you have trust and trustee and so on. Please spread the words. This is an easy thing to do. You can use your phone for that. 2, please try. Don't go away with principles. You know, we do quite a lot of efforts making open data available, producing charter for AI, providing a platform that you can look and see what we do. Please try. Don't talk. Try. It's easy. You can use authentication system. Try. Then it's also use. You know, one of the key things, because it was foreseen, I know it's 22nd, the best outcome
21.
for us will be well-being of citizen. And well-being is including trust. Then to trust, please use. And if you are unhappy, please tell us. Not necessarily with complaints, but with suggestion that we can still continue to improve.
Cool. Thank you very much. Richard, from your point of view.
Just concretely from citizens, given the year we're in, elections are coming up. Tell your politician this matters. You don't have to go into the various details of everything. I don't think this is going to drop off the agenda of the next commission, but other things happen, COVID, conflicts and different things, but just telling them this matters to me. And given Europe still has a high level of trust in its politicians, in its governments, it doesn't have to be every single detail you say, well, this part of the declaration matters to me, not that part. But it does matter. Keep it high and just tell them.
Coming back to the first question, tell us your individual story, that idea of your Facebook issue, for instance. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Renata, what can we do?
Check on your gadget about the rights that you already have, the changes that are there on the automatic web browser, you know, that you can now choose, you know. So test a little bit what the changes that there are already, or kind of the features that on profiling or not that have already kind of been adapted here and there. So I think it's also explore that also a little bit. I think that would be my advice. And if I can come back to her question, I hope for European Parliament elections that will not be deeply affected by, you know, and disrupted by disinformation and deep fakes or whatever, and that we have the tools to address whatever might happen fast so that the virality can be stopped and we can bring in other pieces of information so that citizens in Europe can make a conscious choice when they cast the ballot. And I hope that by the end of the year we have 2 or 3 examples of big platforms where they really, really change behavior. Whether it's algorithmic transparency, whether it's kind of, you know, how they use the data, and how they treat minors. That would be my hope.
Cool. Lofty vision. Thank you very much, Renata. Berends, to finish
You
off.
asked for 2 weeks, so everybody should go to one school in their region discussing the European Declaration of Digital Rights, go to the Association of Business and go to the trade union discussing this, and go to the town hall and make the plate at the wall of the town hall. In 2 weeks, it's reachable.
That should be reachable. Thank you very much for your very pointy actions there. I think we're running out of time, right? Yeah. I think there are drinks available. The food will be served. So I'm sure, as in proper Belgian fashion, the meeting continues now. So let me just ask you for a big round of applause for our panelists and for the organization. Thank you very much. Beautiful. And thanks very much for coming. Enjoy yourselves, all right?